Hold on. So glad to be here with all of you. Is the mic back on now? Yes, it is. Very good. All right, let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Should be a good show. Now, the way we do things here is I give my opening remarks. My opening remarks are then followed by a roll call. Then after that, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the program, by all means, send a super chat or a Rumble rant. That's the way we do things. So we do have a couple announcements here tonight. First announcement is morning message. Every morning on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel, we have morning messages. This is a way to stay plugged in with our community, to get to know each other, to stay plugged in, to support each other. So if you would like to, start your day with revolutionary hope and optimism, by all means, go to the CPI YouTube channel, subscribe, and make sure every morning you listen to the morning message. It's a great way to start your day. This morning, the morning message was a great one. I'm going to play it later on because it was with one of our good friends and all of that. It's going to be great. So there's that. And also, we now have, if you would like to make a morning message as your way of supporting the community, by all means, we have that as an option for you now as well. We have made it very, very easy for people to make morning messages. We have a mechanism through which people can submit morning messages. It's a page. It's very easy to use. So if you would like to support CPI and support other members of our community and help us be there for each other, I would encourage you to go and make a morning message. And that is a great way to do it. A very, very good way to do it. You just upload it from that link. Now, I want to give a special shout out to my team of people right now that are at the Democratic National Convention doing important work for the Center for Political Innovation. Shout out to all of you because you all are working very, very hard. And your hard work is appreciated. And, right now, there's a house party with a David Rovick's concert going on. And our members, two of our members are there. There is a Green Party event with Jill Stein. Another one of our members is there. And another one of our members, Phil, he actually got hurt today on the subway. The doors were closed on him and he actually hurt himself. So he's taking the night to rest. And he has worked very, very hard. So we have a whole team that is working very, very hard in Chicago. We have 1,000 of these books to distribute, and they have almost gotten all of them out. And we have 1,000 of these booklets to distribute, and they've almost gotten all of them out. We are making our mark on the Democratic National Convention, as I talked about. So if you would like to support that work, if you are able to give a contribution to offset the costs of getting everybody there and all of that, go to the GoFundMe and send us a contribution. And thank you to everyone who's already done that, because there's been quite a few people that have stepped up to the plate to help our organization. And we appreciate it. Money has come in to offset the costs, to help us, get this book and its message about who Kamala Harris really is out at the DNC. So thank you. Thank you for that. And, say a prayer for our team of people. Hope that Phil recovers from his injury on the subway. He didn't have to go to the hospital or anything like that. He just got hurt because they closed the subway doors on him. So he's staying home to rest tonight. Shout out to you right now if you're watching, Phil. We're with you in spirit, and I'm glad that you're able to just chill and all of that. And shout out to our people that are at the David Rovics concert. David Rovics is our good friend. He did the morning message this morning. Was him, John McCarthy, and David Rovics had a morning message for the CPI channel. Utterly amazing. Shout out to our member that's at the Green Party event, getting names and connecting with people. We have a good team of people that is dedicated to outreach, and I am convinced that we are going to have an amazing workshop this fall. I am excited. People love this project. The Center for Political Innovation is the community that so many people are looking for. Kinky is there, or Kinkle is there, and she met John, and what a sweet guy. John is a great guy. We love John, absolutely. So, yeah, like I said, if you can help offset the costs of our team and their work out in Chicago, that would be great. Shout out to all of them. And tonight, we're just doing our normal stream. I'm going to talk about Phil Donahue. Because there is some gold there with Phil Donahue. So, if you have something you want me to react to, any news, by all means, send a super chat, Rumble rant. We're on Rumble. We're on YouTube. We're also on Facebook, but I cannot see the chat on Facebook. So before we get to that, Richard Medhurst, what they did to Richard Medhurst is absolutely criminal. The way he was arrested and treated as a terrorist at the British airport. I have expressed my support for Richard Medhurst. Anyone who's targeted for being an anti-imperialist, we stand with, just as we stand with the Uhuru movement. Anyone who's targeted. So I stand with Richard Medhurst. Absolutely, what they've done to him is absolutely wrong. We need to raise awareness about these attacks on our rights, the efforts to intimidate anti-imperialist voices. Richard Medhurst is not a terrorist by any means. He is an anti-imperialist voice on social media, and he's pro-Palestine, and he's an important person, an important voice. So I just wanted to get that out of the way and make clear that I stand with Richard Medhurst. But tonight I wanted to talk to you all about Phil Donahue. But before I get to that, I do want to remind you all, super chats, get me talking in the second half of the show. Anyhow, so, all right. So Phil Donahue is an interesting guy. Now, I know who Phil Donahue was, but for the bulk of his career, I was not born yet. He just died. Phil Donahue was an American television host. He had a daytime talk show for many years. And he was 88 years old at the time of his death. He started his career in television in the late 1950s as McCarthyism was ending. And then he retired in the 90s. But then he came back and he relaunched his talk show in 2002. But as the USA was preparing to invade Iraq, they took his show from him. He got fired. After he came back from retirement, he had his new show up and going, and then they fired him from MSNBC. And it was later revealed that MSNBC had fired him because he was opposed to the Iraq war. So he basically got fired for opposing the war in Iraq. And actually, over the years of his broadcast journalism, there were some really amazing moments in Phil Donahue's career. There were some moments where Phil Donahue did some utterly amazing things and took some utterly amazing stances. Now, I think most of the time he was just a regular daytime talk show host. But there were on anti-war issues, on issues related to racism and political repression. There were times that he went out on a limb and he took some really hard-hitting heroic stances and made some very bold statements. He supported Chelsea Manning. He stood with Ralph Nader, and he was a friend of Ralph Nader's and spoke at Ralph Nader conferences. He was an anti-war voice. He lost his show because he opposed the war in Iraq. Phil Donahue was an important figure. So, I want to go over, Phil Donahue is also YouTube gold. You can find Phil Donahue stuff going back to the 80s. And I want to tonight show you some of the highlights of Phil Donahue's career, where he took some pretty amazing stances. And sometimes they were just amazing moments on his show. Now, one thing about Phil Donahue is that Phil Donahue frequently interviewed, or he had a number of interviews with Minister Louis Farrakhan. Now, Minister Louis Farrakhan, the leader of the Nation of Islam, leader of the Million Man March, an important black leader who is anti-imperialist, who stood with Libya and Gaddafi and supports China and Cuba and anti-imperialist countries. But right before Phil Donahue was taken off the air, I think he first interviewed Farrakhan in 1985. He interviewed him again in 1990. He interviewed him again in 1995. And all of those interviews are worth watching. But there's one particular interview. It was in 2002, before Phil Donahue's show, after he came back from retirement, before they took his show from him, again, where Phil Donahue was on with Minister Farrakhan. And this is a moment in television that I think was utterly amazing. What Phil Donahue, this American radio TV show's host, what he said to Minister Farrakhan in this clip is just utterly amazing. And take a listen to this. This is in the middle of his interview with Minister Farrakhan. This is what Donahue said, and this is Farrakhan's response. This is just an amazing moment in television. I mean, this alone would make Donahue just an amazing person. I mean, this was an amazing moment in television.
You fill Yankee Stadium.
I never was in Yankee Stadium.
I thought you appeared in Yankee Stadium.
No, sir.
Well, which stadium? Which stadium am I confused? You certainly brought
Randall's Island.
But in other cities, there's thousands and thousands of people.
Yes.
Come to hear you speak. And I think I understand why. You speak to their anger. And you know, it's not possible to argue against the anger. Let's look at just a couple of things. Unemployment rate. This is July of this year. Whites 5.3%, Hispanics 7.6%, almost 10%, 10% of black folks. And these numbers, you know, we all know, there's a lot more than that, unemployed. How about the jails? 2 million people in jail. For every 100,000 people in prison, 3,500 are black, 1,100 Hispanic, and 462 are white. When I hear you speak to these injustices, to these, you know, racial profiling, New Jersey state troopers, honestly, I think if I were a black male, I'd be at Randall's Island listening to you speak. I would. And
that's bold for a white man of his age to say, if I were black, I would be supporting Minister Farrakhan. I'd be at Randall's Island. I mean, that's bold. That is a bold anti-racist statement that he just made. Farrakhan is kind of the symbol of black radicalism, black extremism, or whatever. And he's on there and he's going over the statistics of racism in America. And he says, look, if I were black, I would be with you. That moment in television, for a white dude of his age to say that, that is amazing. It is utterly amazing. I mean, and you know, this was before woke. This was 2002. This is long before any of the BLM stuff or anything. And for him to say that, I mean, amazing. But wait until you see where the clip goes after this.
When I hear you speak to these injustices, to these, you know, racial profiling, New Jersey state troopers, honestly, I think if I were a black male, I'd be at Randall's Island listening to you speak. I would. And the political power that you have is undeniable. But you make it tough on the white reporters. I mean, how, you know, it's with all this history of this kind of rhetoric, it's awful tough to say, hey, Minister Farrakhan, sit down, tell us how horrible we are. We have to challenge you as you would challenge us. This isn't a game. This is a matter of the respect that we want to have as professionals. You can't get up there and talk like that as a man of God, using language like you do. So I'm asking for some understanding here. You bring this on yourself.
Sir, if I took the New Testament and took Jesus, the greatest human being in the eyes of Christians that ever lived. I could take Jesus with the scriptures and give him a sound bite and make him look anti-Semitic, because there's a statement that Jesus made in St. John 8:44 where he condemns Jews. If you pull that out, put that up on the screen tonight, they'd be saying Jesus anti-Semite. When Jesus beat the people in the temple, all we need is a 30-second bite on Donahue or CBS or CNN, and they'd say, look at that enraged maniac, how he beat those people out of the temple. You could accuse Jesus of teaching hate, for Jesus said in the gospel, you can't be my disciple unless you hate your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, yea, even your own life for my sake. Take that out of context. Jesus is a hate teacher. Another thing, take Jesus out of context. He's a man of peace, but he said, think not that I come to bring peace, nay, a sword. So if this media were listening to Jesus, like you all listen to me, to snatch things out of context, to deliberately make me look other than what I really am. That is my argument with the press, and that's my argument with you tonight. In fact, I'm really surprised at you, because I thought Donahue, a great man. We missed you when you got your hiatus.
Well, thank you, Minister.
But coming back, this country needs people that will bring out of those who are talking the real issues behind their words. That's the kind of man you are, and that's the kind of man I want you to be, so that your program won't diminish over time, but will grow.
Damn, that was an amazing moment in television. I am going to tweet that out, because that was, first of all, you have this older white man admitting that he would be a follower of Farrakhan if he were black. And then you have Minister Farrakhan pointing out that the way he's taken out of context, to make him sound like a hateful fanatic, an anti-Semite, an extremist, could be done to Jesus if you take it was an amazing moment. That moment alone, like the fact that that was on TV, that millions of people were watching MSNBC and saw that exchange happen. Damn. Thank you, Phil. Phil Donahue, you're in spirit world right now, and I take my hat off to you. That was an amazing moment in television. But there were many other great moments. I mean, Phil Donahue, I don't know. I mean, and again, we're only showing like the really, really good stuff he did. So obviously, most of the time, his talk show was just kind of a normal, trashy American celebrity gossip or whatever. But every so often, there would be a moment where he would hit hard at some truth. Now, after he got fired from MSNBC, he became a real anti-war activist, and he spoke at anti-war rallies. He spoke at rallies against the Iraq War when the USA invaded Iraq and after the USA invaded Iraq. I actually want to show you. So Cindy Sheehan, do folks remember Cindy Sheehan? So Cindy Sheehan was the peace mom. I'll show you a picture of her. Cindy Sheehan. Some people don't even remember her anymore, but she was the peace mom. Her son, Casey, died in Iraq. And so she started camping outside of Bush's ranch, to oppose the war. She was the peace mom, and she got a lot of attention as an anti-war activist who camped outside of Bush's ranch after her son was killed. Right. It was a moment where it was clear that the tide was kind of turning against the Bush administration. Because Cindy Sheehan, the peace mom, she had her camp outside of Bush's ranch, and a lot of people were protesting and stuff like that. So anyhow, Fox News hated Cindy Sheehan. She was a traitor. She was a communist. She was all these awful things. So Bill O'Reilly, who was, he was this right-wing Fox News host. Bill O'Reilly, he was going overdrive about how awful Cindy Sheehan was. So they had Phil Donahue on to defend Cindy Sheehan. And I must tell you, this was one of the best moments in American TV. One of the most satisfying television debates that I have ever watched. I watched this when it happened, and I had tears in my eyes. I never felt so satisfied. This was, I mean, again, Phil Donahue, he'd already lost his show. They'd taken a show from him already. He was just a retired guy who was anti-war. And this was his exchange with Bill O'Reilly. Epic moment in American television. Watch and be amazed.
Thanks for staying with us. And Bill O'Reilly in the Fact or Follow-up segment tonight. While most politicians have stayed far away from Cindy Sheehan because of her somewhat radical views, a few showbiz people have embraced her. In the past, Ms. Sheehan has criticized Israel, saying it is occupying Palestine, has called Iraq.
Oh, God forbid that. Criticizing Israel. Can't have that.
Iraqi insurgents, freedom fighters, has accused Americans of killing people ever since we stepped on this continent, has threatened.
Like, all of those things are true, right? You know, the Iraqis had their country invaded by the United States. The United States government, the USA has killed people since we arrived on this continent. Like it's like, this is what Fox News used to do. People would just say, they'd say, you said blah, 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 and it'd be a bunch of true things. And, you know, and it was like there was never any debate about whether or not they were true.
Hillary Clinton with the loss of her job unless she calls for a pullout of U.S. troops from Iraq, and has called the U.S. action against Afghanistan a failure. Quite a resume. And with us now is Phil Donahue, who supports Ms. Sheehan's dissent. So I'm assuming you don't support all her positions that I just
Let's understand what's happening here. Once again, we have a woman who got to be just a little too famous for the people who support this war. A minority of the American population, by the way. And so the effort to marginalize this woman is underway, and you're helping out.
I'm the leader of the pack. I'm the leader of the pack.
First of all, Cindy Sheehan is one tough mother. And nothing you say or anyone else are going to slow her down.
No, that's fine. She has a right to do that.
You can't hurt her. She's already taken the biggest punch in the nose that a woman can take. She's lost a son.
Oh, okay.
She's lost a child.
But look, I'm not putting words in her mouth.
By the way, she is going to be at the center of one of the largest rallies since the Vietnam War. Proud, patriotic Americans who will show up in Washington this week for one of the most massive, largest demonstrations, protest demonstrations,
and we'll cover
right outside the president's window.
And we'll cover it.
Fox is in the business of saying that this woman is somehow saying un-American things, hyperbole.
No.
Listen to what she's saying.
Nobody said she said anything un-American. We say that her positions are radical, and they are radical.
Let me tell you what's radical. What's radical is to send more Americans to die in this war, which is a monumental blunder by a president who swaggered us into it with, by the way, the at least tacit approval of the Democratic Party.
You know,
there's a lot of sin to go around here.
What's radical for
you want to send more people to this war?
Listen,
is that your position?
If we cut and run out of there like you want to do, we would be putting every American in 1,000 times more jeopardy than they're in now.
We're going to cut and run anyway,
well,
Bill.
That's your opinion.
What's my opinion? American military leaders have said we're going to draw down beginning next year.
The difference between drawing down and cutting and running. Well, you're a cut and run guy, and I don't want my family in danger.
You want to stay the course, don't you?
Look. Here's what I want to do. I want to give the Iraqis a chance to train their army so they can defeat these people who are trying to turn it into a terrorist state.
Bill.
That's what I want to do.
Bill.
Go.
Iraq was not a terrorist state.
Oh, no.
I hope I don't patronize you for saying
guy.
Again.
He was just a great guy.
Saddam was a bastard, but he was our bastard.
He wasn't anybody.
Donald Rumsfeld shook his hand in the 80s.
Well, that's great.
You saw the pictures. Now, listen. You wouldn't send your children to this war, Bill.
My nephew just enlisted in the Army. You don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Very good. Congratulations, Steve.
Yeah, and he's a patriot, so don't denigrate his service or I'll boot you right off the set.
I'm not.
That boy made a decision to serve his country. Do not denigrate him or you're out of here.
I'm not Jeremy Glick, Billy.
That's right. You're a little bit more intelligent than
I'm not somebody you can come and just spew
Don't tell me I wouldn't send my kids.
Now, just so you said there, just for those of you who may not know, that moment, I'm not Jeremy Glick. That's a reference to the fact that there was a young guy named Jeremy Glick who was actually kind of a friend of the Revolutionary Communist Party. He was a friend of the RCP, and his father was a Port Authority worker who died on 9/11. and Bill O'Reilly he signed an ad in the New York Times opposing the war in Iraq, and Bill O'Reilly had him on the show and just verbally abused him. I mean, this is a young man whose father has died, who's an anti-imperialist, and Bill O'Reilly just verbally abused this son of a Port Authority worker who died on 9/11. It was a horrible, horrible moment. And a lot of liberals and others were just like, okay, how dare you treat this young man whose father just died this way? And so that was what Jeremy Glick was. And that was an important moment when, people were like, hey, how is it okay to verbally abuse somebody whose father died on 9/11 just because he's against the war? So that's what that was about. We'll continue.
My nephew just enlisted. You don't know what you're talking about.
Your nephew is not your kid. You
He's
are
my
like
blood.
You are part of a loud group of people who want to prove they're tough and send other people's kids to war to make the case.
You have no clue about how to fight a war on terror or how to defend your country. You are clueless. So is Ms. Sheehan. And for Ms. Sheehan to say that the insurgents have a right to kill Americans and you're shaking her hand, you ought to just walk away.
How many more young men and women are you going to send to have their arms and legs blown off
this is
so that you can be tough
terror.
And point at people in a kind of cowardly way? Take people like Jeremy Glick, who comes on in memory of his parents, and you go
Jeremy
off on
Glick,
him like a big bully.
Hey,
Billy, you have to
Mr. Donahue, with all due respect,
have you apologized to him for
baloney.
that?
Jeremy Glick came on this program and accused the President of the United States of orchestrating 9/11. That's what he did. Right after 9/11 happened. Do you know what the pain that brought the families who lost people at 9/11?
This war.
You buy into left-wing propaganda, and you're a mouthpiece for it. Go ahead.
This war is not fair to the American troops. This war is unconstitutional. This war turned its back on the people who framed the most fabulous document in the history of civilization. I speak of the United States Constitution.
All right. Why isn't the Democratic Party speaking that way?
I'm sorry that it isn't. I am, but let's understand something.
Are we all so misguided?
21 Democrats in the Senate voted against this war, as well as Jeffords, an independent, and may the Lord shine his blessings down upon Lincoln Chafee.
I'm going to say something.
I'm almost finished,
I'm
Billy.
going to give you the last
I'm almost finished. Lincoln Chafee, the only Republican in the Senate to vote against this war. We should be building statues to all these people. October 2002, they stood up to a president, and they knew that, first of all, only Congress can declare war. Why is that unimportant to you, Billy?
Listen,
why can't you become the patriot that your loud voice proclaims to be and stand behind the Constitution and insist that we never go to war again without the approval and
That's
consent of the United States Congress.
If they want to take action, they can take action. Now, I'm going to say something. I'm going to give the last word. The Iraq War is not something that I embrace. It absolutely could be a tactical error. All right, just
it's hard to know this.
Listen to me, and then you're going to have the last word. Not something they embrace. Could be a tactical error, optional war, and we have not waged it the way I had hoped we would wage it.
But what?
But we are in a war on terror. We are in a war on terror. Our cause
has
is
nothing
noble.
to do with the war on terror.
Yes, it does. And if you don't understand geopolitics, if you don't understand Iraq would be a terrorist state if we pulled out of there, and you don't know anything.
It was poorly planned and poorly executed, but Bill O'Reilly wants to send more kids to fight and die. We've already had almost 2,000. Just let me have the last word. In the last year, two things have doubled. The number of dead American troops in Iraq have doubled from over 1,000 to almost 2,000. You know what else doubled, Billy? The price of Halliburton stock from $33 to $66. That doesn't shame you? That doesn't make you wonder whether this is an enterprise that is worth the support of the American people? We need you at this rally on Saturday, Billy. We need you out there in front of it.
But
to protest.
I'm not going to be
There is no democracy without
dissent.
You should be proud of people who stand up and dissent.
I respect your dissent.
A lot of fine men went and died to give me that freedom.
You got it. I respect your dissent. I think you're way off in your analysis.
You want to send more people to die in Iraq? Is that
want to win the war in Iraq?
Win. What does win mean?
Means
tell me
those
what win
people
means.
have a chance at democracy. I gotta go.
How long is that going to take?
I gotta go.
How long is that going to take?
Those people deserve a chance at freedom. Thank you for coming in. Right back with an unbelievable story, the growing theory that the flood.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an epic moment. And the stock was Halliburton stock. Halliburton is the company that Bush and Cheney were tied to that was heavily tied in with military contracting. People saw that as corruption. And that's what he was referring to. That was an epic moment in American TV where Phil Donahue, he got on there, he stood up for Cindy Sheehan, he called out the war in Iraq. Epic. That was absolutely epic. Now, Phil Donahue, he was doing this a long time. Okay. I mean, he was 88 years old when he died. So, you know, again, he was doing this for many decades. I've got a couple more clips I want to show you. And, you know, I guess there's one clip here. I don't know how long we'll play this one because it's a long interview, but we're not going to show the whole thing. But he did the counterculture figure Jerry Rubin. And he was actually pretty critical of Jerry Rubin, the hippie, the counterculture hippie from the 60s. So we'll put that on for a little while. And then there's another time where there was another epic moment. I've got two more things here. So we'll do Jerry Rubin for a little bit. We'll react to that. And then we'll play this other clip that really surprised me. So here we go.
I don't care what you ask. I'm giving the answer that's in my head. Nixon doesn't think black people exist. Nixon doesn't think young people exist. Nixon's only concerned about the middle silent majority, which we don't have to worry about because it's silent. What is that? I have a silent majority. Well, how do you know? It's silent. Young people are the only people in this whole country that have saved the soul of America by protesting the crimes committed in Vietnam, Asia, and at home in the courts and in the jails, etc.
See, already I'm concerned about. See, I get the feeling you're giving me
sincerity here.
You're giving me answer 23B. So when I
no, it's 27A.
All right. Well, let's you know what I mean, don't you?
No, I don't.
Well, I'm disappointed that you don't seem to be able to converse with me. You know, sort of. I ask you a question, and you start waving your eyes and look at those people. Why don't you look at me, and I'll ask you a question because it's sincerely asked.
Didn't I just? I
want to know.
I've met you before.
I don't think so.
Didn't we meet 5th Street in New York? You sold me that dope. You're my. What are you doing? Sort of on the side, you're a TV personality, and you're the biggest dope dealer in New York City. Yeah, and he comes on the show real sincere. I want to sincerely tell the people about your real activities, man.
Yeah, that's cute.
You got the best LSD and best pot in town. You find no wonder you know the air schedule so well. You're flying in New York and making deals on 5th Street, 6th Street, 7th Street. He comes on here real serious now. Do you think it might prolong?
Now, this is interesting because it shows you, like, Jerry Rubin, right? This Jerry Rubin is synthetic left. I mean, he's basically a piece of shit bread tuber. This is 1970, right? And Phil Donahue is a sincere anti-war, progressive kind of guy, but he's not part of their woke. I mean, this is exactly like BreadTube, right? Everything's a joke. Everything's about using drugs. Everything's cynical, right? He's on there. Oh, you know, Richard Nixon thinks black people don't exist. And like, even though they're on the same side, kind of, Phil Donahue is a serious person who actually wants to help the country. And Jerry Rubin is a drugged up CIA pessimistic creation. And the exchange between them is really interesting, right? And it's like, I watch this and it's like, you kind of hate Jerry Rubin for how much of a, I don't know. I mean, it's just like taking leftism in this cynical, pessimistic, drug-induced version. Yeah, it's 1970s Vosh, exactly. And, you know, Phil Donahue is a sincere anti-imperialist guy, sincere anti-racist guy, and he ain't having it.
That's cute. That really is cute.
That's true.
Okay.
But you're upset that I've destroyed your cover.
But, you know, if you're... I have to, you can understand how I would question the sincerity of your convictions about the war and people dying in Vietnam and people dying here at home and the problems of poverty. When you come on and tell funny stories about me selling dope, that's wasting time, Jerry.
My wife is right now in...
Exactly, right? It is wasting time, right? You know, you got a national TV audience. This is back in the day when there's only 4 channels. Millions of people are watching. And instead of teaching them about economics, instead of talking about how the American workers are being screwed to pay for this ugly war, he's on there rambling about, hey, I smoke dope. Yeah, you sell drugs, man.
Sweden, meeting with the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese.
Let's talk about
and student revolutionaries throughout Europe.
Good for your
to plan for a day of demonstrations sometime in the fall, when in every country in the world, from Japan to the Soviet Union, every country in the world, people are going to be in the streets protesting America spelled with a K in Vietnam and Asia.
Now that's your wife. Let's talk about Jerry. Now here we are. You've got X thousands of people out there who are listening to you now, mad at me because I put you on. All right, here's an opportunity.
Take dope. Smoke dope. American Army's falling apart because of all the pot smoking. You dig that, don't you? You know how the war in Vietnam is going to end? The war in Vietnam is going to end.
That's going to be another cute story.
The war in Vietnam is going to end when the American Army puts down its guns or turns its guns around and aims it at the head of the generals. And marijuana smoking right now is so prevalent in the Army, people just want to get high. They don't want to go out and fight and die.
Okay.
You dig it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's actually true is that heroin addiction was a really big problem among Vietnam vets because, Southeast Asia, Indochina, and, Indochina was a center of the heroin trade. And a lot of the U.S. aligned forces in South Vietnam were involved in the drug trade. And a lot of Vietnam vets became drug addicts because they were in this war. They were doing something really, really awful. And sometimes they were injuring themselves to avoid fighting. And then they'd get, opioid painkillers and all of this. So like, he's all just like, oh yeah, we're going to end the war by all the soldiers using drugs, man. That'll be great. I mean, think about what happened, how fucked up it was that so many Vietnam vets did end up becoming drug addicts. I mean, the war in Vietnam was absolutely wrong. I'm not obviously supporting the war in Vietnam, but it's like, this idea, oh, drugs are just amazing. That's how we're going to stop the war. Smoke dope, smoke dope. That's what he's on there talking about. And Phil Donahue was like, dude, I agree with you. We need to end the war, but just stop acting like a fucking maniac.
There's a real connection. There's a real connection between pot smoking in Asia and the defeat of the American Army. Yeah. Because here's American boys, American men, sent thousands of miles away to Asia to fight for land that, they don't even speak the language. And what are they fighting for? And they're fighting against peasants, fighting against 15-year-old kids, fighting against housewives, fighting against everybody. Every single person who is Vietnamese is a potential enemy. So what are we doing over here? Someone hands up a joint and say, yeah, I just want to get high. Come back and get high and get thrown in jail for getting high. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you and understand, I haven't made any conclusions.
Of course you haven't.
I want to know.
You're just an open book.
Right. I'm concerned that your efforts could undermine
the efforts of who?
The efforts of the people who, since long before you thought about.
Like who?
American Friends Service Committee, Quakers.
Oh, they're not doing anything.
People who marched in the moratorium in Washington.
They're not doing much. We're in league with them.
Let me tell you what.
I'm speaking. Wait a minute, man. Listen, you're not giving me speeches. We'll each make I'm speaking at the moratorium rally in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Dig it. I'm speaking there. You see, look, young people.
You understand what bothers me?
No, I don't, because you got a psychological problem, but I'm not your psychiatrist. Look, young people know that this government has no morality. That this country was founded on the destruction of the Indians.
Yeah. Young people, you speak for young people?
I'm speaking for myself, and I'm speaking for a truth that I feel in the streets, and if you don't feel it, you're blind. Because young people know that the people that have power in this country have no soul, no morality, and no ears. Absolutely none. And we know that this war is not going to be ended by writing a letter to President Dick Nixon, because Dick Nixon is a criminal. He's a war criminal. He is a war criminal. He missed his chance in Nazi Germany. He would have done very well as the head of the Hitler Republic, and now he's just the head here. And Spiro Agnew, what do you think he is? He's just a super Nazi. You know that. And we know that the only way to change this country is by overthrowing the government. That's the only way. That's the only way the war in Vietnam is going to be ended. How else do you think it's going to be ended? By writing a letter to Dick Nixon, please get out of Vietnam. What are you talking about? He's a racist. When a yellow person dies in Vietnam, that doesn't count, because the only good yellow person is a dead yellow person in Dick Nixon's head.
You don't think it's possible that the polarization that your kind of behavior creates, I'm asking you a question, I'm listening. Can serve to enhance the position of Dick Nixon in the White House? If you're against Dick Nixon, middle America is just liable to think, listen, anybody this cat is against can't be all bad, I'm going to vote for him.
Yeah, but see, Nixon will find anything he needs to enhance his power.
And that's actually a really good point, right? Richard Nixon got all kinds of support because a lot of middle Americans, this guy's on there wanting their kids to become drug addicts, telling them, oh, smoke dope, you do drugs, and we're going to violently overthrow the government. I mean, like, he looks like a nut, right? And And Phil Donahue is on there. He says, there's people that really want to stop the war, that, you're sounding like a nut. I mean, and it's true. Richard Nixon said, we're for the silent majority that wants nothing to do with this. I mean, he's actually, pointing out that this kind of, ultra left, anti-working class insanity that kind of got associated with leftism was hurting the anti-Vietnam War movement.
The fact is there's got to be a polarization in the country. There's got to be a polarization. Well, wait, listen, I get 2 sentences out, and you act like you're like on the toilet, and say, listen, why don't you shut up and let me talk, You invited me down here, you said, you got to come here, we have no music, we have no guests, if you don't come, we have no guests. Now you ask me a question, you keep quiet, maybe the punchline will contain your answer, So don't be so constipated.
They're rude. I mean, and he's been talking the whole time. Phil Donahue's barely gotten a word in edgewise, and he's all like, oh, why you interrupted me? He's making, toilet noises and all of this. It's like, this is the face of the disgusting synthetic left we want nothing to do with. The drug-induced, pessimistic, anti-working class, this is... I want nothing to do with this.
Okay, don't be so constipated. I'm just relax. I'm disappointed in you.
You're so incapable of functioning.
I'm totally incapable of. I'm a misfit. Haven't you realized? I'm a misfit. I don't fit in to this plastic TV show with this plastic TV personality. I don't fit into that. I don't fit into. And every young kid out there knows that you're plastic. They know you're a plastic man. I don't fit into that. I don't fit into your asking ridiculous questions, because you know darn well that the people who are ending this war are the people who are draft resistors in jail, are the people who are in courtrooms, like the Conspiracy 10, now it's 10 because our lawyers are defendants too, the Conspiracy 10 that are facing up to 25 years in jail together. Okay. Hey,
got it.
I thought you wanted me to look at you when you're talking. Now you're no longer looking, you're looking down at the book and so forth. Anyway, the purpose of TV is to sell soap. So here's the book. Do it. Young kids should steal it. This book is banned in Cincinnati. Shiloh-Toes Pogues, all those pig department stores, none of them will carry the book. You can only get it, I think, in... you can only get it in, I think, Kids and one of the campus bookstores. Young kids should go in and say, where's the book? See, they won't hold it, but they got all the kinds of books by all the right-wing liberal professors and so forth, but they won't hold this book. This book, first sentence, this book will become a Molotov cocktail in your very hands. Page 4, it says, you got to read it stoned.
You say...
read this book stoned.
Yeah. You say...
Do it! Do it!
You say the heroes are the people who've gone to jail and who are drafted. Now, there are hundreds of people in jail who haven't found it necessary to behave like you. You don't like my behavior? I'm embarrassed by your behavior. Here you come. I'm wondering. Here you come on here with a suit and a tie, and that suit and tie is the uniform of imperialist America. Do you know people who speak in a calm, silly voice like you with a suit and tie are the exact same people who are running the jail system, running the court system, running the corporations. You look like a college dean running the school prisons, I'm not done, which oppress young people. People who look less like you are the same type of people that are running the war in Vietnam. You see, what we have recognized is that the American middle class, in its suit and tie, is the real criminal,
It's the American workers. When he says middle class, he means working class people with a house and a car. They're the real enemy. Not the big banks and corporations, not the ultra monopolies and the record companies that promote the drugs, and not the CIA and all of that. No, the enemy is the people, right? That's the point. This is the synthetic left, right? That this is how they prevented a genuine mass working class movement in this country from emerging, right? He says the enemy is the American middle class, the average American people that just want to feed their kids and have a decent life. They're the enemy.
We're running the jail system, running the court system, running the corporations. You look like a college dean running the school prisons, I'm not done, which oppress young people. People who look less like you are the same type of people that are running the war in Vietnam. You see, what we have recognized is that the American middle class, in its suit and tie, is the real criminal, And so you taught us that lesson of Nazism. You taught us the lesson of Nazism.
I don't.
Well, don't. It's impolite to interrupt.
I don't.
I learned that in school. It's impolite to interrupt. So the people out there want me to get a thought out, and you're really constipated. You really got an anal problem.
I don't judge people.
What's your name?
Phil.
Phil, not Tom?
I don't judge people on the clothes that they wear, and I'm disappointed that you do.
Oh, I'm sorry you're disappointed.
Well,
it won't be the first or the last time. I'm sure you're disappointed in the young people that burned down the Bank of America in Santa Barbara, an act which freed us out of jail. I'm sure you're disappointed in the hundreds of thousands of people that had riots all over the country when we were jailed, because they freed us. That's how we got free. We didn't get freed by old Phil or Tom or whatever his name is, Donahue, sitting up here. We got freed by the young people who shed their blood, who shed their life, who went into the streets. That's how we got free. And the Vietnamese know, you see, America only responds to fire. They only recognize poverty when the ghettos burned. All of a sudden, the ghettos burned, and people said, hey, maybe people are poor, maybe blacks are oppressed. They only recognized the war in Vietnam when somebody burned himself on the Pentagon, when 100,000 people went up and sieged the Pentagon. You know, take these liberal senators like McCarthy and McGovern and Kennedy, all those guys. They only spoke after the crazies, the freaks, the nuts, the idiots went into the streets and started burning draft cards, started throwing rocks at buildings. Then all of a sudden they said, well, these young people, their methods not be good, but they got a point. What are we doing over in Asia anyway? You see, so we know that this country only responds to polarization and dramatic protest.
We're talking with Jerry Rubin, a member of the
We're talking with Phil Donahue and Smoke Dope. The audience to speak.
Hi there, Jerry Rubin on the line. Hello.
I would like to know, since you speak for the young, what is your age?
My age, 15.
Mentally, I'm not speaking about mentally. I'm speaking about chronologically.
No, mentally, physically, 15.
All right, since you won't answer that question, what may I ask?
Jerry, that's the nicest compliment I've been paid. Because 15-year-old kids know where it's at. 15-year-old kids haven't yet been propagandized by the school system, by the media, by the press, by the churches of America First, and all that bull. You see, so I dig
do know more than you.
What?
15-year-olds do know more than you. Not many 15-year-olds would run around looking the way you do. Nor would they think they're in a country that has given them the right to walk around like you.
See, like there are two births. There's your first birth, which is like your physical birth. And then there's your religious or your real birth. Now, and most young people in this country experience death before life. That they're born dead because they're prisoners in the home, they're prisoners in the school system.
Well,
and then all of a sudden, then all of a sudden something happens, they're involved in a demonstration, they get stoned, something happens and they wake up and they decide, wow, everything my parents have told me is a lie. Everything I learned in the school system is a lie.
Well, you know...
Wait a minute. Truth is contained within. All of a sudden, they have a new birth. And I was reborn. So actually, I'm really 6 years old, because I was reborn in 1964 in the first massive student demonstration in Berkeley in 1964, the free speech movement. And I've been getting reborn ever since. And I think that what young people are going through is a total rebirth, finding out that when they were kids, they were prisoners in their home by their parents and their teachers.
You had one more brief comment, ma'am.
Now, really?
Yeah.
Do you mean to tell me, how many children do you have of your own?
About 3 million.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean ones that you will admit to, and give your name to.
Yeah, he was born in 1938. Thanks for calling.
1938. Well, you know,
so
you're
chronologically ridiculous, born in 1938.
Hi there, Jerry Rubin on the line. Hello.
Hello, it's Ray Clark.
Yeah, good.
Oh. How can a station hold their license and have such filth as this on TV? How can you put out what used to be called yellow journalism?
Look, don't let this guy fool you. I said earlier he's the biggest dope dealer in New York City. He got stoned before the show began, and you know,
hey,
that's where he's at.
Yeah, but
well, you don't think Jerry should be on?
No, I don't think he should be on. I think you're responsible for having him.
Defend civil liberties now. Yeah. Come on, defend the First Amendment. Well, go ahead.
I think that...
Defend the First Amendment.
Now, who should decide who should and should not be on?
Spiro! Spiro should decide. The President of the United States, Spiro Agnew. Ask Kim Agnew. You know Spiro Agnew's daughter, Kim Agnew, was busted for pot. 14 years old. You dig where that's at? His other daughter wanted to march in the moratorium, and old Spiro locked her up in the bathroom. And Spiro said that we parents must decide for our children what is right and wrong and what they can do. Someday our children will grow up and they'll be parents and they can decide for their kids what to do. As parents, we ain't gonna decide for our kids what's right and wrong. We're gonna get stoned with our kids. Can you dig it?
You had a question?
They're not even letting you talk.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's their type. That's their type. They won't even let you talk to them.
Yeah, he won't let you talk. You're right, and that is discouraging.
No, well, you won't. You're responsible for it.
You're right. You're right.
You're responsible for what you have on.
Well, listen, let's try something. Ask him a question. Let's see if we can get a conversation going here.
No, I don't. I wanted to ask you because you're the one that's responsible for having him on.
Yeah.
You're the one.
I don't. Wait a minute. Look. Let's not be afraid of ideas. Let's realize that
we're not afraid.
You don't get anywhere by turning your back on this thing. And my grandchildren are going to read about this trial. No way around it. We can't just forget about it. It's there. It's important. Even though you may not agree with it, very unpopular, no question. Jerry Rubin is not going to be elected to anything.
No, we're not disagreeing with that.
The past always is afraid of the future.
You're just putting on yellow journalism.
Tom Donahue expresses. He expresses, Phil Donahue, excuse me, I know a disc jockey in San Francisco.
Yellow journalism is all you have on.
The past is always frightened to death of the future.
They won't let you
it's
talk.
like the British. The British said, "How can you let Tom Jefferson and George Washington say these things?" There wasn't television then, so it couldn't go on television.
You want people to call you and talk to you, and you won't
that's
talk.
the whole history, and so America is very afraid. The only difference
here. You got your answers written down before people talk to you.
Talking at the same time.
Yeah, that's right. He is. Well,
he's got his show and I got my show, and people can have a split screen and decide who they want to watch.
Well,
except he controls the cameraman.
Thanks for calling. Okay, thank you. Hi, Jerry Rubin on the line. Hello.
Hello, Phil. Is your audience comprised of young people? I mean, the ones applauding this idiot.
Well,
no. Most of the audience is over 30, and don't use words like idiots so loosely.
Well,
we're proud to be idiots.
You are.
If that's the name you call us, we're proud to be idiots. We're proud to be any name that Middle America calls us, that the establishment calls us.
Well,
you call us communists, you call us anarchists.
Why
we
don't
take
you shut up?
You're right. We're the rejection of everything you stand for.
Look.
I want to show you a picture of Jerry when he was young. Go ahead. Did you have a question you wanted to ask, ma'am?
Well, I just object to young people applauding this idiot.
All right, wait a minute. Now, this is Jerry. There you see Jerry in the lower right-hand corner. This is a high school picture. Look how straight he is there on the right. And that's Jerry with an American flag as a child on the left and a sailor suit. These.
But anyway, that's Phil Donahue's exchange with everybody in Chicago was talking over each other. I moved from Chicago. Well, anyway, that's Phil Donahue's exchange with Jerry Rubin, the new left icon. There's actually some interesting moments in that interview. I don't have time to show tonight. Like one of them is where he says, I criticize my own government. I don't criticize other governments around the world or whatever. But I actually want to show you another exchange that Phil Donahue had. This is the last clip I want to show you, and it's a weird one. This is a weird clip because it's almost like a precursor of today in a weird way. If you think about, so long before Donald Trump ever ran for office, I mean, we're talking, this is in 1990, right? This is when I was 4 years old, right? In 1990, or I guess I would have been 3 years old, 1990. This is a clip. There was a congressman in my home state of Ohio named Jim Traficant, who was a Democrat, and he was a populist. He had been the sheriff of Youngstown, Ohio, and he was elected to the U.S. Congress, and he had a bad toupee, and he said he wanted to build a wall along the U.S. border, and he talked, he was like a proto-Donald Trump populist. And so Phil Donahue went to Youngstown, Ohio, and he did this town hall with Jim Traficant. Now, Jim Traficant eventually went to federal prison on corruption charges. He was just this kind of well-known demagogue in Youngstown, Ohio. He was a populist Democrat in Youngstown, Ohio. I wouldn't call him a leftist. He was not a leftist, but he wasn't, normally right-wing either. And you will see this clip. This will blow your mind. This will completely blow your mind because keep in mind, this is 1990. All right. This is, this is 2024. So this is a long time ago. All right, here we go.
The raid in the Saudi desert, what percentage are American?
About 82% at this point.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Not that we don't want to stop an aggressor that has moved on a sovereign nation, but we have many nations around the world that are concerned about this aggression. I think they should all be participating in like kind, and it shouldn't be America always coming out with the checkbook and with our soldiers and our troops and our young people to pretend to protect the interests of the world.
Yeah. Were you consulted when we bombed Tripoli?
Not at all.
Were you consulted when we invaded Panama?
Not at all.
Were you consulted when we invaded Grenada?
Not at all.
Well, where were you then? How come you're not screaming? You're
Well, the
only in the
president is the commander-in-chief. We have a War Powers Act after 60 days that they have to bring it back to the Congress to continue that type of involvement. However, the administrative White House people are trying to contest that now on its constitutionality. Let me say this to you. We made an awful lot out of Grenada. The Youngstown Police Department could have invaded Grenada successfully. We're now talking about a defense. I'm more concerned about people jumping the fence, coming into America, a stupid Congress giving them citizenship, and we're going bankrupt. I'd like to see us take our troops from overseas. Hear me. Take our troops from overseas. Cut down on all that expense over there. Those are nothing but welfare programs for those overseas countries. Our soldiers are paying their checks. They're cashing their checks, spending their money over there. Bring them back. Put them on our borders. Keep the drugs out. Keep people from coming in here illegally. Take care of our country.
It's America first. America first.
That's common sense.
Oh, you got no idea where this is going to go. It gets really spicy really quick here. Keep watching.
Phil, I think it's a tragedy that you've become a shill for Jimbo. I think you've sacrificed your credibility for ratings. Hey, Jim, that's right. You're holding a political rally here. Jim, you said you're still sheriff. Does that mean that you're still taking money from the mob? The people in this country need to know.
He beat the rap.
Listen.
Look at the smile on Phil Donahue's face. He's enjoying this. He's having fun with this. He's like, this is good TV, right? This is like one of the most fun days he's had in a while. Like, look how much fun he's having.
There's a federal court that's found that he accepted bribes. There's a federal tax court using the standard of proof that we use in our everyday life has found that he accepted bribes.
Hang on a minute. Hey, I can explain this. They're not going to know what you're talking about across America. They got enough crime to worry about without worrying. Please let me in here a second.
Let me respond to this fella.
The congressman was accused of taking mob money and beat the rap. He was found innocent. Now, wait a minute. Hold on a minute. 1 second. Listen, we're nothing if we're not honest. He did get nailed on an income tax charge, and he's paying his bill. All right.
Now, let me respond. Phil, let me respond.
Mr.
One
Congressman,
time.
in all due respect to you, you told me when you first ran for office that you controlled the minds of the non-thinkers in this community. Why can't you go to Washington and control the idiot minds of the pseudo-thinkers in the nation's capital?
Congressman, you're on.
Number one, the second fella has...
Get ready for it. Get ready for it.
Number one, the second fella has just brought up a point that is ludicrous. He happens to be a member of a Jewish descent. The Jews are very upset with what I've done, and he's trying to take it out, and I'm not going to back down to any powerful group. Number one.
Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
Number two, the first fellow that asked the question was an attorney. And let me tell you what, if you're an attorney, I wouldn't want you...
Maybe for those of you who just missed what he just said.
Get out, and I'm not going to back down to any powerful point that is ludicrous. He happens to be a member of a Jewish descent. The Jews are very upset with what I've done, and he's trying to take it out, and I'm not going to back down to any powerful group. Number one. two.
Yeah. Back then, this kind of thing could happen on television, right? This would never be allowed on television nowadays.
Number two, the first fellow that asked the question was an attorney. And let me tell you what, if you're an attorney, I wouldn't want you defending me because you sounded like a fool. And finally, I want to make this statement. This is America. When you're tried by a jury of your peers, that's sacrosanct. Thomas Jefferson made a statement that I want you to remember as an attorney. He said, God forbid the appointment of federal judges for life because they can take the Constitution and mold it like clay in their hands. Thank God for juries.
Now,
one other thing.
Wait a minute.
One other thing. I'm not an attorney, and I stood on my own 2 feet. I looked him in the eye, and that's what we've got to start doing with our damn government now.
Yeah. Congressman.
And don't get me mad.
Hold it. Congressman, what is the reference to Jews? Explain that to us.
It's not a derogatory fashion, but this individual has been a member of an opposing party that's been challenging me.
Who has?
One of the individuals asked the question.
Well, why don't you tell us who he is?
Fine, Mr. Rubenstein.
Well,
he's come out. He's come out.
Yeah. He says he's a Democrat. Why would you make it a Jewish issue?
I'm not making it a Jewish issue. He happens to be of Jewish descent. Because of my involvement in a couple cases, I have been targeted by the World Jewish Congress. I've just come to learn through the grapevine. I'm not sure that the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee has targeted me. And usually when they do, they beat a congressman. But let me say this.
You have not then been supportive in your voting record for Israel. Is that your point?
Let me say this, and this is very important to me. I've been called an anti-Semite. The next person in New York calls me an anti-Semite, I'm going to drive up there and punch him in the mouth. Number one. Number two, let me say one other thing. I have looked into a couple cases. And I'm not going to apologize for it. And I am going to say something here today that's very unusual. I think the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee has too much control, like many other lobbies, on our Congress in the government.
Damn.
The lady behind me, Mr. Congressman, the lady behind me said, you Jews, you attorneys, you blacks, you're all alike. That's what you bring out in people. You just... The seed of hatred and the seed of bigotry that everyone carries around, you cultivate. You'll turn on Eastern Europeans, you'll turn on labor, you'll turn on blacks, you'll turn on anyone because you are a political opportunist. And the last time I said it, I got threatening phone calls.
Hey, Phil, I want to answer that. I think I deserve an answer. Here's my answer. This is my answer.
And we'll be back in just a moment. To be part of the...
Yeah, that was insane. And that happened in my home state of Ohio in 1990, and that was on national television, right? That was a moment. Now, yeah, that was a mic drop moment. That was a mic drop moment. Wow. That was something else. So, yeah, I mean, Phil Donahue, I'll say those moments that I just showed you from television, you know, that all of those moments show he made a contribution. I think he was on the right side. Let me just put it that way. You know, despite most of his, I'm showing you the good highlights, but those 4 moments that I just showed you, those moments were absolutely epic. And I mean, the fact that he could bring that message into American homes, whether it was with Bill O'Reilly, whether it was with Minister Farrakhan, whether it was, you know, what he just did there with Jim Traficant, where Jim Traficant just got up and just said the Israel lobby has way too much power and all of that. Yeah, I mean, it was epic. You know, you do the best with what you got. And that's kind of what we do with Center for Political Innovation. We do the best with what we got. And he did the best with what he got. He had a national TV platform, and he pushed the envelope every so often. He knew about imperialism. He knew about the wars. He had a genuine anti-war sentiment, and he pushed the envelope, right? And he pushed the envelope to try and help the forces of good in the world. And my hat goes off to him. I appreciate Phil Donahue, and he will be missed. 88 years old. He passed away yesterday. He will be missed. He was a great person. And those moments in American television were absolutely epic. Absolutely epic. And the fact that he was able to do all of that, and the fact that he got his show, taken away. They removed his TV show because he was so anti-war in 2002. This is a man who was a hero. Phil Donahue was a hero, and I take off my hat to him. So I just wanted to go through all of those highlights for tonight. So on that note, folks, let's do the roll call. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, who is with us tonight? Names and locations, who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations, who is with us tonight? Names and locations, who is with us? Names and locations. All right, Utica, New York, Mark Jones, R.I.P. Phil. St. David's, Bermuda, Mariah in North Carolina, Godspeed, Phil Donahue, right? Jenny in Cincinnati, Omar in Toronto, Derek in Youngstown, Ohio, Denver in Colorado, Art in Nova Scotia, wait, where am I? Singapore, Alex in Brazil, Sherry in Cape May, Connecticut, Bob in Troy, New York, Adelaide, Australia, condolences to Margot, Eric in Lockhart, Texas, Baruz in Massachusetts, April in Salt Lake City, Balthazar in Oakland, Patch in Arizona, Seneca in South Carolina, April and Chris in Salt Lake City, Balthazar in Oakland, right? Kalanwa in Canada, Chris from West Virginia, Bob in Troy, New York, Chad in Spokane, Washington, Chris in Los Angeles, Legal Weedland. All right. Very, very good. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Good to have you with us. Denver in Minnesota, welcome. Anthony in Detroit, welcome. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Anybody else? Scott in Maryland. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Getting caught up at the Bill O'Reilly clip. Yeah. Alex in London, UK. Kay in New Orleans, Micah in Las Vegas, Jody from Wisconsin. Welcome, Jody. Good to have you with us. Chicago, Illinois, Kinkle. Shout out to you, Kinkle. You're a beloved member of our community. Good to have you all with us. Well, if anyone has any super chats, get me talking in the second half of the show. We got one super chat so far from Mariah. So lately, one thing I have been doing, Steve in Boston. You're always here, Steve. You're very reliable, and we appreciate you. Nabel from Pakistan. Welcome, Nabel. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I wanted to mention to you all, that, right. I just cried for Phil Donahue. Yeah. I mean, that was epic. It was absolutely epic. The fact that he was able to do what he did. I mean, do that segment there where he got a member of the U.S. Congress to call out the Israel lobby. George Galloway gave me the new name. Oh, George Galloway is great. you know, and I mean, the fact that he was able to, you know, defend Minister Farrakhan and talk about racism the way he did, the fact that, I mean, it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome what he did. So, folks, for a while, you know, we play obscure music on this channel, right? I tend to like folk music. So there's a song from Canada, a folk song from Canada. And I don't know if it's woke or not, right? It may be, you know, not a song that you're allowed to sing now. I've always loved it. You know, I remember it from when I was a kid. And it is a folk song from Canada. And it's basically from the voice of a Native American, talking about, you know, the woodlands of northern Canada. And it's very poetic. It's probably not appropriate because I think white people wrote it and they're kind of romanticizing Native Americans. But I like it. It's called Land of the Silver Birch. And it's a beautiful song, I think. You know, and so I'm going to put on Land of the Silver Birch. I found a performance of Land of the Silver Birch. We'll listen to that. I guess that'll be in honor of many great Canadians like Jordan Peterson and Maoist Rebel News, Jason Unruhe, and, you know, all these great people from Canada, right? It is weird how many YouTubers there are from Canada, right? I will say it is a little odd, right? Start thinking of all the YouTubers that you know that are in Canada. Thought Slime, Canada. Lauren Southern, Canada. You know, what's his name? Steph Molyneux, Canada, right? I mean, it's a little weird how many YouTubers are in Canada. It's a lot, right? If you start adding it up, right? It's a lot of them in Canada. So I guess in honor of all the great YouTubers and not so great political YouTubers in Canada, let's play Land of the Silver Birch, Canadian folk song, which is probably not politically correct because it's in the voice of a Native American written by a white person, but whatever.
Land of the silver birch, home of the beaver, where still the mighty moose wanders at will. Blue lake and rocky shore, I will return once more. Boom diddy boom 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 diddy boom 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 diddy boom boom boom. Down in the forest, deep in the lowlands, my heart cries out for the hills of the north. Blue lake and rocky shore, I will return once more. Boom diddy boom 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 diddy boom 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 diddy boom boom boom. High on a rocky ledge, I'll build my cabin close to the water's edge, silent and still. Blue lake and rocky shore, I will return once more. Boom diddy boom 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 diddy boom 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 diddy boom boom boom. Land of the silver birch, home of the beaver, where still the mighty moose wanders at will. Blue lake and rocky shore, I will return once more. Boom diddy boom 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 diddy boom 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 diddy boom boom boom. Boom diddy boom 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 diddy boom 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 diddy boom boom boom.
There we go. Some epic Canadian music. So I am waiting to see if we got more super chats, but this is a good one here. So Donahue called out Ayn Rand after horrible hypocritical comments on Palestine. Now, that clip of Donahue yelling at Ayn Rand I have found, but I want to find the whole thing. I want to find what Ayn Rand said beforehand. I don't want to just see Phil Donahue calling her out. So I'm trying to find that right now. I want to find, because there are multiple Ayn Rand interviews that Donahue did, but I want to find the one where he says to her about Palestine. Let's see if this is the one, right? Right? I think this is the one, right? So let's put it on. I think I found it, right? I think I found it. Let's hope this is the right one. So this is the one where she's in the red costume, right? I think this is the right one, because the clip of him yelling at her or like confronting her over how she talks about Palestine, that's gone viral. But I want to show, you know, the whole exchange. I don't want to just show him yelling at her, right? So let me see if I can, you know, no, see, okay, let's see. Okay, so let's see if I think this is the right clip, because Phil Donahue is wearing the right suit, the same suit as when he yells at her about Palestine. So let's see if this is the right clip. I'm hoping that this is the correct clip that I will show here. But if anyone else has any more questions, by all means, we'll do it. But let's pull up this Palestine thing. I have seen the clip of his response to her, but I want to show the whole thing. First of all, folks, Ayn Rand is Satan, in my view. Ayn Rand, virtue of selfishness, you know, helping other people is a form of weakness. Ayn Rand is like the definition of evil in my mind, right? And, you know, Ayn Rand advocates free market capitalism, privatize everything. And we can talk about Ayn Rand, because the thing about Ayn Rand is I understand the appeal, right? And that's something I work really hard to do. When I don't like somebody or something, you know, I don't focus on what I don't like. I try to focus on what I do like what's the appeal, right? And so I understand the appeal of Ayn Rand. And I can talk about that a little bit later if you want. You know, not ready to get into that now, but let's see if this is the right clip where he calls her out over Palestine. Let's see if this is the clip. All right, here we go.
You're against compulsory education, I'm
yes. Sure. No, I'm against public-funded education, because that's the sure way to create a country of people disposed towards dictatorship, and that's what you're seeing today.
And we'll be back with Ayn Rand in just a moment.
That's right. Get rid of public education, right? Poor people don't need to learn how to read and write. You know, if they want that, those kids should work in a factory to pay for their school.
Listen, there was a Miss Rand. We're with Ayn Rand. Incidentally, her latest book is titled, listen to this, Introduction of Objectivist Epistemology. I should have had this at Notre Dame. I would have impressed all the girls. But it is a rather multisyllabic, high-sounding title, which
it's
speaks,
not a novel.
Right, which speaks to your philosophy of objectivism.
That's right.
I just have one point that I think should be made, Ms. Rand, with time fleeting here. Your characterization of the situation in the Middle East came down rather gratuitously and in a very angry way on the Arabs, and without discussing the merits of either side in a most complicated and painful collision of cultures and peoples in our world. Why couldn't the millions of men, women, and children who are Arab and who find themselves in this desperate conflict and look around wondering where peace will be, why can't they be angry with you for your characterization of them, your slap at them, your roundhouse criticism of them, when you don't seem to be able to tolerate a questioner who suggests that she disagrees with you? Characterization is you do not accept any criticism unless you level it.
No, I don't resort to terrorism. I don't go around murdering my opponents, innocent women and children. That is what I have against the Arabs. That takes the conflict out.
Oh, yeah, because Israel's never killed anybody. I mean, that just never happened. Israel never murdered any Arabs or Palestinians. I mean, my God.
Of the sphere of civilized conflicts and makes it murderous. And anyone, private citizens, who resort to force is a monster.
Right. And Israel wasn't like created with force or anything. Israel hasn't invaded. I mean, this is like, it's like you have to live in a bubble to think that what she's saying here isn't at all logical.
What makes me condemn and despise them.
Do you believe that there is going to be a day where there's going to be a female in the White House as president? And how do you feel about that?
I wouldn't vote for her.
You would or wouldn't?
Would not.
You would not?
No.
Why not?
For many reasons. I've written an article about that in my former magazine. You'll have to find out my reasons there.
Yes.
The magazine is The Objectivist.
Would you not vote for her because she was a woman, even if she were better qualified than any man?
If we had followed that law, I might.
That low? I think you have a very, very
I'll
low
tell you
opinion of
why.
women.
Let me answer this. It is not to a woman's personal interest to rule man. It puts her in a very unhappy position. I don't believe that any good woman would want that position.
So you are essentially against leadership positions for women, then?
No. Oh, no. A president is not the only leadership position. There's senators and congressmen and
it's all right for you if they run and be elected?
Oh, certainly, and I vote for them. But wait a moment. A commander-in-chief of the army, a woman, I think it's unspeakable.
We are in New York City with Ayn Rand, and we'll be back in just a moment.
So yeah, that was the whole exchange there. He called her out for how she spoke about Palestinians. She got up and she said, oh, they're terrorists. Oh, once they're terrorists, they have to be wrong, as if Israel's never killed anybody. So there we go. But yeah, so there we go, folks. That was Phil Donahue's exchange over Ayn Rand. But anything else on people's minds tonight? Do I have to put more music on? I do want to answer more questions. I answered Mariah's very good point about Ayn Rand. I think I'm going to publish a separate compilation of all these great clips because they're all great. I'm going to make it like a special video that I put on the channel. And yes, he brought on people he vehemently disagreed with, and that takes courage, right? But takes courage. But yeah, so I guess I'm going to put on more music. But if anyone has any more super chats or anything, I'll probably keep this going for another 40 minutes or so. But I give me something to talk about, right? We got kind of blank space on the air here. But yeah, I will put some more music on, because that's what we do. I have my love for a good melody. I grew up listening to folk music, and that is one thing I take from my parents that I do appreciate. They taught me to love folk music. So, yeah. So I will put on a folk song. Which folk song will it be? I'm thinking a sea shanty because I like sea shanties, right? So yeah. All right, let me see if, we'll put on a sea shanty here. But if anyone has any more super chats, rumble rants, get me talking, right? That's what I'm here to do. But I thought that was great. I'm really glad we got to experience those moments with Phil Donahue together, because Phil Donahue was a legend. He really, really was a legend. Do you think Palestine will ever be free? That's good. That's a good super chat. So I'm going to put the song on, like I said, and then after the song is finished, then I will answer that one. And if anyone else has any more super chats, I will answer them, because I am here to answer your questions. So all right. Okay. We'll just put this on the desktop. All right. So this is a folk song called The Maid of Amsterdam. This is a version that I have not heard before. So there we go. All right. The Yarmouth Shantymen, The Maid of Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam there lived a maid. Hark well what I do say. In Amsterdam there lived a maid, and she was mistress of her trade. I'll go tomorrow roving with you, fair maid. A roving, since roving's been my ruin. I'll go tomorrow roving. took that fair maid for a walk. Mark well what I do say. I took that fair maid for a walk so we could have a little talk. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. I put that fair maid on my knee. Mark well what I do say. I put my hand on her knee. Said she, young man, you're rather free. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. I put my hand upon her thigh. Mark well what I do say. I put my hand upon her thigh. Said she, young man, you're rather high. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid.
Yeah, we can do better than that. We can do better than that. That was not a particularly good version of the song, I must say. I do apologize. You know, I can't play like professional versions because I might get hit with a copyright issue. But yeah, this is another version. We'll put on hopefully a much better version of the song. I don't know why that was so bad, but hey, it happens. It happens. But you know, it happens. So yeah, I'm just waiting for that. We do have one more super chat that's come in. Any more super chats? Anything else people want me to talk about before? Oh, it was great. Okay. Well, hey, maybe you liked it. Okay. I thought it was particularly bad, but there you go. They forgot the words at one point and I didn't hear much harmony going on. And, you know, I don't know. I thought that was particularly bad, but we'll see. Maybe this next one will be better. Maybe this next one will be better. All right. So this is another version of the Maid of Amsterdam, right? Hold on. Just gotta we're going to put on another version of the Maid of Amsterdam. All right. Or not. Oh. Okay. All righty. Okay. There we go. And now the Maid of Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam there lived a maid, mark well what I do say. In Amsterdam there lived a maid, and she was mistress of her trade. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. She promised me that she'd be true, mark well what I do say. She's true to me, she's true to you, she's true to the whole damn Navy too. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. I put me hand upon her toe, mark well what I do say. I put me hand upon her toe, says she,
young man, that's rather low.
I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. I put me hand upon her calf, mark well what I do say. I put me hand upon her calf, says she,
young man, you're there by half.
I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. I put me hand upon her knee, mark well what I do say. I put me hand upon her knee, says she.
Young man, that isn't free.
I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. And I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. I put me hand upon her thigh, right well what I do say. I put me hand upon her thigh, says she.
Young man, you're drawing nigh. I'll
go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. And I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. I put me hand upon her thatch, mark well what I do say. I put me hand upon her thatch, says she.
Young man, that's my main hatch.
I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. And I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. I slip me mainmast to her blocks, mark well what I do say. I slip me mainmast to her blocks, says she.
Did I mention that I have the pox?
I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving, since roving's been my ruin. And I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. Once more a-roving, since roving's been my ruin. And I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid.
All righty. Okay, so now we have 2 more super chats that come in. There we go. There we go. I'm seeing stuff in the chat and I don't know what people are talking about. So yeah, it's like I don't follow. But that's okay. So there we go. All right. So first question. Do you think Palestine will ever be free? I do. I do think that Palestine will be free. However, I don't have a quick fix solution. Okay. And that is what frustrates people. All right. If you ask me, does Israel have a right to exist? I'll say, if you really press me, no. Israel doesn't have a right to exist, just like Rhodesia didn't have a right to exist, just like apartheid South Africa. A state created by one race for one race doesn't have a right to exist, right? That generally governments should exist for all the people that are there. And when you have a country that's created for one group to reign supreme, that's wrong, right? In the United States, for a long time it was like that. And we've adjusted. We have basic civil rights. There's still obviously big issues with racism, but if we declared that the United States was for white people, that would be wrong, right? That would be, and for a long time, we did say that. So I don't think that Israel as a state for one race has the right to continue to exist that way. Now, why am I hesitant to say that? Because me saying that doesn't change jack shit. Really, it doesn't, right? Caleb, saying Israel has no right to exist. It's like, do I get a medal? It's like, oh, wow, you took an epic stance, Caleb. You nailed it. I mean, it's like, it doesn't change anything, right? And that the way that the Palestinians will get justice is with the balance of forces in the world shifting. And that's not a quick fix, but it's happening already, right? Support for Israel is very strong in America, and it's very strong in Britain, France, Germany. But outside of the first world, not so much, right? Really, aside from, you get some evangelicals in Africa, people that are very, very religious. Evangelical Christians might support Israel. People in Latin America that are really religious evangelical Christians might support Israel. But you go to South and Central America, the overwhelming majority of people don't support Israel. You go to Africa, the overwhelming majority of people don't support Israel. You go to Asia, the overwhelming majority of people don't support Israel. Really, the only place that Israel has a huge amount of support is in the first world. Now, there are some exceptions, right? India, there's a lot of support for Israel in India because there's anti-Islamic sentiment, etc. So it's complicated, but for the most part, support for Israel is based in the Western countries. And the Western countries are not going to be the center of the world economy. The world is moving toward multipolarity, and that is just a fact, right? And as Russia and China get stronger, as African countries assert their independence, as countries in Latin America become more independent, as countries in Asia become more independent, Israel is going to have less and less of a free pass. The way Israel gets away with oppressing the Palestinians is because the United States and Britain and France and Germany give them a free pass. Well, China doesn't give them a free pass. Russia doesn't give them a free pass. The Arab world certainly doesn't give them a free pass. South and Central America don't give them a free pass. So, you know, as the dynamics in the world shift, Israel is going to have less and less support. And Israel is going to have to make deals more and more with Russia and China and Iran. Or it's not going to make deals with Iran. Iran will never recognize them. But Israel is going to have to shift how it exists, because in order to continue existing as a country, it's going to have to do deals with, you know, with countries that are friendly to Russia and China. And the world is going to be less centered around the West. And eventually Israel will have to create a situation where there's a Palestinian state. That's going to have to happen, right? There will be a Palestinian state, and Palestinians will be citizens of that state. Now, is that freedom in the sense that the Palestinians want it? No, right? You know, obviously that would be the Camp David Accords, right? That Israel has a right to exist within the 67 borders, and then the Palestinian state in the West Bank and in Gaza. And Israel has never enacted that. But, you know, I think things will get better for the Palestinians as the world shifts. And I'm not telling the Palestinians they have to wait. They're allowed to fight for their freedom. They're allowed to resist. I'm just telling you, based on my assessment and based on what WikiLeaks revealed, that Israel will probably collapse in the next 50 years because there's not support for it among Jews and outside of Israel. There's not enthusiasm for Israel like there once was. That gradually the Palestinians will move toward getting justice. Now, obviously, that's way too long to wait, but I think that also explains Israel's desperateness. Why is Israel desperate to keep this October 7th bombing? Why have they just kept it going all this time? Because of the fact that they realize time is running out. Israel as a project is losing steam, and everybody knows it, right? And give it another generation, you know, the Israelis themselves will probably liquidate. I mean, you know, they'll say, all right, fine. You know, they'll at least at minimum be a Palestinian state. So again, I wish I could give you a quick fix that would solve the crisis. I think the Palestinians will be free. I think it's going to take time, and it's just going to be about the dynamics in the world shifting, because outside of the first world, there's not support for Israel. All right. Ayn Rand brings to mind Saul Alinsky. For all the time I was active on the left, I never heard of him. It was only when I heard his name associated with the Clintons, and they tell me Saul Alinsky was no leftist. Now, why does Ayn Rand bring to mind Saul Alinsky? I'm not following you yet there, Chris. Let's talk about Saul Alinsky. All right, Saul Alinsky, he was in Chicago, and he was a labor organizer in the 1930s. He was involved with the Communist Party's unemployment councils in the early 30s. He was never in the Communist Party, but he was kind of a fellow traveler and a friend of theirs. And then he joined the CIO, you know, the AFL-CIO, and he wrote a biography of John L. Lewis, the leader of the CIO, the big labor federation that was led by the coal miner labor organizer John L. Lewis. He wrote a biography of him. And then after World War II, in the 50s and 60s, he became like a community organizer for the Democratic Party. That, you know, when the Daily Machine in Chicago and the corrupt Democratic Party of Chicago wanted to get stuff done, they would call Saul Alinsky, and he learned the tactics from the unemployment councils and other things. He learned the tactics of organizing low-income people. And there was a school of people in the 60s that they wanted to do what the Communist Party had done in the 30s in the 60s. You know, they wanted to build a poverty movement, right? And that's, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he had Resurrection City, right before he died. You know, right, Martin Luther King Jr. was organizing around economic justice. And you had, you know, Michael Harrington, the eventual founder of DSA, who had served in the Lyndon Johnson administration. He was one of the State Department socialists. Gabby, that's a really sweet question. I look forward to answering it. He was one of the State Department socialists. And he was working with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. around poverty. And you had Saul Alinsky and you had Frances Fox Piven, who was an intellectual. I think she might still be living. She lives in New York City and she's like a left-wing intellectual. And they were talking about building poor people's movements. But the 1960s, the U.S. economy was still very, very, very strong. So it was not it was not like a thing that would, that would really take off. But there was, and Frances Fox Piven and Saul Alinsky and, their big achievement was the motor voter law. The fact that you can register to vote at a DMV, at a Department of Motor Vehicles, right? Because poor people have to go and get their driver's license. And so the idea is that, poor people can register to vote there, and that'll increase voting under of low income people. And that'll help the Democratic Party. That was their great, achievement, was that they got the motor voter law passed. And it was just kind of like, how can we use poor people to be the foot soldiers of the Democratic Party? And that's kind of what Alinsky is about. And then Alinsky became the demon during the Glenn Beck years, because Barack Obama had run some of these community organizing groups in Chicago that traced their lineage back to Saul Alinsky. When, Glenn Beck and all of them came forward, that became like a big talking point, of the anti-Obama, Obama's a communist, that whole thing. Saul Alinsky became a big part of that. Saul Alinsky was just a community organizer for the Democratic Party who had a communist background way back when, but he was just kind of an organizer of low-income people for the Democratic Party. And he became kind of a guru in the 60s. And some of what they did, there's a lot of, they talk about community organizing, where they send people out to knock on people's doors and, and raise money. And I don't know, a lot of that stuff, like the canvassing. I was really into the door knocking. I've read Rules for Radicals, so there we go. Yeah. Saul Alinsky, I don't think of Saul Alinsky as being like this amazing, dynamic, figure. Rules for Radicals, I read it. It's very basic. It's very, kind of social democratic, government serves the rich. But if we get enough poor people involved, we can change that kind of basic social democratic consciousness. I don't know. I don't find it to be all that radical that the right-wing noise machine was making it out to be something. And I also don't find it to be all that, it's not full of like great secrets about how to organize either. It's just kind of, it's something that is part of left, I guess, Democratic Party left culture, I guess. He was this old guy in the 70s. They decided was, the great activist from the 30s who could organize Democratic Party liberal activism. I don't know what more about it. I do know that, what was it? Who was it? Jane Fonda and what's his name? Jane Fonda and Tom Hayden, when they kind of, they were pro-Israel and they were kind of moving away from being communists in the early 80s. They were funding a lot of these kind of like liberal activist organizing projects that were associated with Saul Alinsky. And, you have various groups that did like environmental organizing and, people would knock on your door to save the whales or something like that. It was, it's, the right wing, they want to make it out to be like radical communism or something. But it's just kind of, I don't know, get people to go knock on doors for kind of pet causes of the Democratic Party. The more you read that stuff, Rules for Radicals is fun to read, but I don't think you're going to get much profound knowledge from it. It's just kind of, the rich have too much power, but if the poor people get together, they can counter it, but there's way more of them, and they need to get organized. They need to get involved. And, being a radical means you get the poor people involved in the political process to counter the rich. I've just summarized the whole book there. So there we go. All right. Hope soon all the real Muslims and Jews live in peace and harmony. Well, don't we all? Right? Right. I mean, obviously, we don't wish anyone ill will because of their race, because of their religion, and that there are certain values that come across in every major religion. I will say it is a little bit weird, I must say, and it's funny because I just did my whole stream talking about Phil Donahue and all that. I will say it is a little bit weird that there is suddenly like a burst of anti-Semitism. I used to get accused of being an anti-Semite all the time, right? Because I wrote a book about the Israel lobby, and I was an anti-Semite and all this. I notice nobody's saying that no more. And I'm seeing stuff that used to be taboo. I'm not even going to name names, but in my circles, in some of the media outlets that I'm friendly to, I'm seeing stuff that I'm not totally comfortable with, that I think borders on, anti-Semitism a little bit. My feeling is that, and I talked about this, and in our textbook, if you read Out of the Movement to the Masses, in chapter 2 on Sam Marcy, we talk about the Jewish question, right? And we talk about, the JQ, and that the way most of the left talks about the Jewish question, they say there's nothing there, right? It's just Israel's a tool of U.S. imperialism, of Western imperialism, and that's it. And it's like, no, right? You read Marx, you read Lenin's writings on the Bund, that, a movement to separate Jews from non-Jews is reactionary. Now, Jews are a group of people, they're an ethnic group that under feudalism was assigned the task of handling money and being moneylenders. And they were separate from everybody else, and they lived in ghettos, and they experienced horrendous persecution, but they also had privilege in feudalism. They were able to get education that other people weren't able to get. They had more access to business opportunities, etc. And a culture emerged among them that was based on the idea that we are the others in European civilization, right? In any European country you went to, the Jews were separate. They were the others. And everywhere that Jews didn't have this special job of being the moneylenders, they would just convert to Christianity. And if you read, there's a very good book called The Jewish Question. I have it right here, and it's by a Marxist. And if you read it, he lays it out there. I mean, this is actually a very good book. Abram Leon, he wrote this book, The Jewish Question, right? And he basically spells it out. He says that Jews are an artificially created ethnic group that served a purpose in feudalism. In feudalism, you need a group of people who can handle money. And so they served that purpose. And after feudalism was done, they really had no reason to exist as an ethnic group anymore. There was an ideology that developed among that ethnic group that we are separate from everyone else. And that's because we're better. Right. We're superior, and we'll never fit in with everyone else. We're just so different. We're just so special. We'll never fit in with anyone else. Marx was from this ethnic group, and he wrote an essay and said, I want nothing to do with this. I want nothing to do with this. And this whole culture that you all have created based on we're separate and all that, I want nothing to do with this. And Lenin was also from this ethnic group, and he wrote an essay, and he said any attempt to preserve that way of being is reactionary. And Zionism, the struggle to create a Jewish state, is the most extreme form of it. But Bundism, there was a movement in Russia called Bundism that said, we can't have a regular communist party because Jews are just so different and so special. We have to have our own group. And Lenin wanted nothing to do with that either. And he said, that's reactionary, right? And, that Lenin basically said that what he called, the spirit of the ghetto, right, is this mindset that developed among Jewish folks. And they were facing persecution. They were isolated from society, but they also had privilege. So it's complicated. It's not like, it's not like a colonized group. It's not the same thing, right? It's a group of people that were forced into a position of being separate from society, faced horrendous persecution, but at the same time also had great privileges. And so a mindset developed among them, and a culture developed among them that we are separate. We're separate from everybody else. And that mindset and that culture is something that communists have always opposed, right? Marx from that ethnic group denounced this. Lenin from this ethnic group denounced this. And that's that. And Zionism is the ultimate expression of that mindset, right? It's the idea that we're so separate, we need to have it. We need to go and artificially create a separate state for us, right? And on top of that, they're anti-populism, which is a big part of Trotskyism, hatred for the peasantry, which is a big part of the synthetic left, the idea that deep down, all ordinary people are a bunch of Nazis. That is, that is a continuation of that mindset. And communists and genuine communists and revolutionaries have always said we want nothing to do with that mindset. We don't hate anyone for their religion. We don't hate anyone because of their ethnic background. But communists from that ethnic background, and there's always been a large number of communists from that ethnic background, they've always said, look, there is a certain culture that we grow up with that says we're different than everybody else, that we're better than everybody else. We can never fit in with everybody else. And if we want to be serious working class organizers, we've got to move away from that. That's it. That's all there is to the JQ. There's no conspiracy. There's no protocols. There's no, it's that simple, right? That there is a culture that had developed over thousands of years, or hundreds of years, really, and that genuine socialism must break with that mindset. Zionism is the most extreme interpretation of that, but it's not just Zionism. And this is where the left gets uncomfortable. The left just wants to say, well, no, it's all just Zionism. No, it's not just Zionism. The spirit of the ghetto, right? It's more than just Zionism, right? It's the belief that, Trotsky's hatred for the peasantry, his belief the peasants were this inferior mob, this inferior rabble, and and you couldn't have real socialism, and and all of that. It's the neocons, right? And and the synthetic left, and Irving Kristol and Leo Strauss and their elitism, and it's a mindset, and that if you building any movement or trying to build any movement on the basis of that identity, of that ethnic group, Lenin and Marx both said is not going to go anywhere good. And we said that in our textbook very carefully, because you have to be careful, right? Because also people get very brutally persecuted, hate crimes get committed against Jewish people and all. And the idea that, it's all just a big conspiracy and they control it, that's anti-Semitism. And that obviously leads to very horrible things. But if you don't acknowledge, and this is the problem, if you don't acknowledge that something's there, which is what most of the left does. Most of the left pretends there's nothing there. Oh, it's just Zionism. We're against Zionism. No, it's more than just Zionism. Okay. It's more than just Zionism. And it's a problem in leftism specifically, right? That mindset of we are different, we are superior, and the masses are our enemies. Most communist groups think that way. Okay. And this is a problem, and it's a bigger problem beyond just this, right? I mean, I'm reading some very good writing by Reuben Osborne, who was a British communist psychologist. And I'm reading his very good writing about the problems the communist movement had in the 30s. And he said, we have this mindset that we're the devil, that we're the other, and we don't want to be patriotic. We have this mindset that being patriotic is foolish. Why shouldn't people love their country? Right. I mean, I'm reading this very profound. If you read Marx and Freud by Reuben Osborne, and if you read, I'm reading now, I'm making my way through a very good text called The Psychology of Reaction by Reuben Osborne. It's all very profound. And that leftism is tainted by the spirit of the ghetto, this mindset that needs to be opposed, and that genuine Marxists have always opposed it, but because, there's a soft spot for it. And there's a soft spot for it in leftist circles. And I smelled that when I came to New York, right? When I first came to New York, I was always, because I'm not Jewish, right? I'm not of Jewish descent. And I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and I grew up in a religious Christian family, and I was seen as the enemy. By a lot of these old Jewish communists because of that. I didn't understand why they thought that, but, it took me a long time to realize, the reason that they are so opposed to Christianity and they cringe when there's Christianity, the reason that they have this condescending attitude toward Black people, right? And they have this hatred for white people, right? There's a long history of that. And that's not because people are bad, and that's not to, but these are demographic issues. It's complicated, right? We want to pretend that race and ethnicity and regionalism doesn't exist in the United States. We're just this great melting pot. We're not. We are not, right? And when I came to New York City, because I'm from Ohio, because I'm from a small town, because, my family are Christians and I grew up going to church and all of that, I was viewed as a piece of dangerous white trash. That's basically how I was viewed by a lot of the people in the Workers' World Party. They see people like me and the people who voted for Trump as their enemies. Whereas, and I've pointed this out many times, this is an expression of this, right? In the Workers' World Party, they had an office, and people from various different political groups and causes would walk into that office. If you walked into the office and you were black and you said, I am against gay marriage, or a lot more homophobic things, they would condescend toward you. Oh, of course you are. Oh, that's really unfortunate. There's room for education around that. They just dismissed you. And if you were a white person and you walked into the office and said, I'm against gay marriage or something like that, it would be, get out of here, you racist, you homophobic, you were the enemy. Now, what is that about? Why is it that if they're supporting gay marriage, they can't explain to the black person why they support gay marriage in a polite voice, and they can't explain to the white person in a polite voice why they oppose gay marriage? Why is it that if a black person opposes gay marriage, it's just, oh, you cute little thing, and if a white person opposes gay marriage, you must be a Nazi, you're an evil person? Both of those are irrational responses. That both of those responses don't recognize that person is a person, right? Both of those responses are basically saying you're not a person, right? And that in politics, you have to be able to engage with people as people, right? And if a black person says, I'm against gay marriage, you should be able to have a conversation about why you're for it. And if a white person says, I'm against gay marriage, you should be able to have a conversation about why you're for it. But there is a specific ethnic reason that they had this attitude, because in their minds, right, white European Christians are the Ku Klux Klan. They're the Nazis. Deep down, they just want to murder and kill Jews. And that's because of years of persecution and the pogroms and the fact that their families fled here from Eastern Europe and, and the Holocaust and all of that stuff. So in their minds, if a white European Christian starts to sound right-wing or conservative or nationalistic or whatever, they're the enemy. And then they have a sympathy for black people because black people are persecuted by white European Christians. They know about the lynching and Jim Crow and all of that. So they see black people as victims and potential allies. And so, whatever, if they, they're just poor victims. And, and a lot of, the Nation of Islam and a lot of black people don't appreciate that attitude either. They're like, we don't like, the condescension that we've gotten from Jewish leftists of how they just kind of see us as victims. They want to direct our movement and use it for their own ends. And Marcus Garvey got in big trouble for saying things like that. And the attitude that white European Christians are all, bloodthirsty anti-Semites, that's a bigoted attitude also. And that really, when I finally just had it out with the regular left, it was over the issue of Trump. They could not understand that people might vote for Donald Trump for good reasons. They just couldn't wrap their minds around the idea that there are good people who voted for Donald Trump. In their minds, everybody who voted for Donald Trump who's white is a bad person in their minds, right? I can see they might forgive like a black person who was an evangelical and voted for Trump. They might forgive, somebody else. But in their minds, if you're white and you voted for Trump, you are just lower than dirt. And they can't understand that a lot of white people voted for Trump because he said he was going to stop the wars, because he said there were big bankers that ran the United States that didn't have their interests. No. They're just bad people, And it's an ethnic thing. Right? It's because, the low-income white people who voted for Trump don't live in cities like Los Angeles and don't live in cities like New York. And, they just see them as, rural white Southern trash. I mean, that's how they see them, right? The white working class is the enemy in their minds. And they might, and it's regional. I mean, they might sympathize with firemen in New York City who are working class or whatever. But it's this idea that, and I've heard them say it, right? And I heard it so many times. I heard statements. I was told, I will never forget when I was told by a certain person in New York City, not going to say her name, but, she told me that everyone in Ohio believes that Jews have horns and tails. Everyone in the whole state. I have never met anyone in my entire life who thinks that Jews are born with horns and tails. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. She swore by it. No, if you go to Ohio, where I'm from, everyone thinks that Jews are born with horns and tails. I said, no, they don't. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But no, she swore by it. Well, that's racism, right? If I run around saying that black people are so stupid, they think all white people have horns and tails, I'd be a racist, right? And she's basically saying that, and that's what they think, right? Not all of them, but a lot of them have a very bigoted attitude that white people that are not Jews, white European Christians are just, we're Borats. They basically think we're Borats, that we're walking around every day, and they think that, a Christian cross is somehow an anti-Semitic symbol, that, when we have the Christian cross, we're saying the Jews killed Jesus and we hate Jews. That's not what we're saying. And I've talked, and I would say to them many times, right-wing evangelical Christians are huge Zionists and supporters of Israel. And they'd say, well, not really. They just say that. But deep down, we all know all those evangelical Christian churches, they all want to kill the Jews. No, they don't. No, they don't. Right? And they just have this it is ethnic. Right? And it's actually, I would say this is worse. This is where it gets weird. It's worse with the so-called anti-Zionist Jews, because the Zionist Jews are just blind supporters of Israel. And they recognize that Israel gets a lot of support from right-wing conservatives, so a lot of them don't have this attitude. But it's your anti-Zionist Jewish leftists, your counterculture New York City, Trotskyite, those kind of folks, right? Those community organizing Brooklyn leftist Jewish folks. They are the ones with this attitude that, all of the flyover country in middle America are just burning crosses and chanting "kill Jews" 24 hours a day. And they believe this, right? And I mean, one of them said, oh, if you get out of a major city and you get into a rural area, everyone's a Nazi. And I'm like, no, they're not. No, they're not. No. If you get out of a major city and you go to a rural area, they said everyone, is basically a Nazi. They've all got, Confederate flags and swastikas and all this. I'm like, that's not true. There are obviously racist people. But it's, but they have this. So anyway, I could ramble about this all night. I've lived in New York City for the longest time. And to be fair, there are a lot of Jewish folks I know who are not like this, right? Yeah, exactly. Did you read Settlers? And there are a lot of Jewish folks who are not like this. And the greatest Jewish communists of the 1930s said, get over this. I'm reading, Osborne right now. I'm really enjoying Osborne. Osborne was a psychoanalyst in Britain, a British communist psychoanalyst in the 1930s, Jewish. He wrote 2 amazing books, Freud and Marx, A Dialectical Study, great book. And I'm reading now his book, The Psychology of Reaction. Amazing. And he himself, he's saying we got to get over this. And he said one of the biggest problems is that, communists have this opposition to any nationalism or patriotism. And he's like, this is a big problem. People love their country. And he talks about how, it's no E on the end, but it's really profound writing. I'm reading, I printed it out. I went and got it spiral bound. I printed it out. There's no print edition of it I can find anywhere, but, I'm reading it and it's very profound. Like one of the things he points out is he says that, communists are constantly accused of loving every country but their own. Right. And that's a fair point, right? Communists were always hands off Iraq, hands off Libya, hands off China. Did you hear about the people in Yemen that are being oppressed? But you'll never catch us with an American flag. And to most working people, if you love every country but your own, that's the equivalent of a man who would love every woman except his own wife. Right. And that if we don't love our country, what are we doing? Well, it's about the fact that being a communist in America or in Britain makes you kind of a dissident, an outsider. And so we have this, but think about that, right? And he says that's a fair criticism that people make. Communists love every country except their own. And to most people, the way we act, it looks that way. And to be honest, with groups like the Party of Socialism and Liberation, it's true. So there you go. With most communist groups and woke groups, that's true. And how do we come across to average people if we love every other country but our own, right? And that, we should love our country, and we shouldn't view this, people who love their own homeland or have a spiritual attachment to, they call them the motherland or the fatherland for a reason. And we shouldn't view that with contempt and condescension, right? And that we have to get over this otherness that is part of, you read Osborne, brilliant stuff, right? And I'm reading it now, and it's like, he is a leader of the Communist Party in Britain, and he's a Freudian psychoanalyst, and he is saying, look, if we are going to become a real movement and defeat fascism, we have to think different. And he's critiquing from a psychoanalytic perspective the communist line. It's really fascinating stuff. But anyway, I could ramble about this stuff all night. This is like the story of these streams has been me. Anyway, what do you think made Ayn Rand the way she was? Her father. So the story of Ayn Rand is she was a child in Russia, and her father was a chemist, and he owned a chemical factory, and he was a wealthy chemist. And the Bolshevik Revolution happened, and it was war communism. The whole country was under war communism, and so her father, their home, they forced them to let other people live in their home, and they seized the factory and made it used for state purposes to wage the war. And her father, who she looked up to, and this is very Freudian, but it's very true. Ayn Rand looked up to her father like any child would. Her father was her hero, and she saw the state, the communists, humiliate her father. Right? Because her father, his property was taken away from him. He was forced to have people they didn't know stay in their home because there were housing shortages and people were moving around in the process of a war. And she saw her father essentially emasculated at the hands of the Bolsheviks. Right. And that had an impact on her. She was from a wealthy family, but the revolution happened and the country was in the middle of a civil war and millions of people were dying. And so her father, who she looked up to, who she idealized, she saw him humiliated and having, his property seized, having people come into the house, having soldiers, Bolshevik military people, I think, beat him up or humiliate him. And that traumatized her. And she went into the real world looking for, if you read Ayn Rand's work, she's looking for a strong man. She's looking for the non-conforming great man who never surrenders, and she hates anything that reeks of weakness, and she's looking up to anyone who looks like a powerful figure, and she has an opposition to any kind of what you might call populism, right? Or any mass movement, because she sees those as people going to persecute the great men like her father. She's traumatized by the way her father, was denigrated. And that's, I don't think the Bolsheviks were wrong to do what they did and make him, house people, and they have a shortage of housing. I don't think the Bolsheviks were wrong to do what they did and use his chemical plant for military purposes. But she idealized her father. Her father was a petty bourgeois, low-level capitalist and a chemist, and he was denigrated in front of her. And she, that hurt her, because when you're a child, you look up to your parent. And when you see your parent humiliated and you see your parent, not looking all powerful, that is going to have an impact on you. And I think that's what happened with Ayn Rand. And if you look at Ayn Rand all throughout her life, she's looking up to, one of her heroes was a wife strangler, a man who strangled his wife and killed her and could have avoided the death penalty if he just apologized, but wouldn't apologize. She thought, oh, what a great hero. He wouldn't back down. That's pretty nuts. But it explains she wanted a strong man who would never surrender, and she hated the masses, the rabble that would get in the way of the strong man. If you read it, that's Ayn Rand. Makes perfect sense. Why is Laos barely discussed in communist circles? Well, it's a very small country, the Lao People's Republic. It's a very small country. It's friendly to China. It's friendly to Russia. It was originally going to be part of socialist Vietnam, but then there was a feeling that it should be separate. And, it's not always having a good relationship with socialist Vietnam. Its foreign policy is a bit different. But yeah, very small country and, not a very big economy, not a very big population. The USA owes them reparations. The landmines that are there, it's absolutely horrendous. So, there you go. All right. Did you collect Pokemon cards? No, but my brother did. My brother loved Pokemon. I don't know. I think when I was in like junior high, junior high, in the morning while we ate breakfast, my brother would turn on the Pokemon television show. And it would be on just before we went to school. So like as we were finishing our breakfast, the Pokemon television show would be on. Well, anyway, my brother played with Pokemon cards. My brother did the Pokemon thing. I never did the Pokemon thing. My brother was allowed to do a lot more. Well, I don't know. Again, you don't want to get into your personal stuff on here, but my brother did a lot more typical kid things than I did. Let me just put it that way. I was the oldest and my parents were very conservative. Not in the political sense, but in the, what they would, I wasn't even allowed to watch TV that had, commercials on it. I was only allowed to watch PBS until I was a certain age. And, my parents were very worried about the music I'd listened to and what I would watch. And my brother was allowed to do a lot more normal kid things than I did. So my brother did the Pokemon thing. I was probably a little too old for it when it started, right? But my brother was a couple years behind me and he did the Pokemon thing. He really got into the Pokemon thing. He got the Pokemon cards and he did the whole thing. And I do remember when the Pokemon movie came out when I was in high school. For a while, I kind of resented my brother over the Pokemon thing because it was just like, I thought it was stupid and little kiddish or whatever. But, when the Pokemon movie came out, the movie was about Mewtwo or whatever. I remember it was like a Saturday, my brother and myself and my mom and like one of my brother's friends, we all went to go see the Pokemon movie and we all had a good time. And yes, Pikachu is cute. Pikachu is adorable. Right? Pikachu is cute. And, we all had a good time at the Pokemon movie. It was actually sweet. You know what I'm saying? It was just, it was just something that, we could all just kind of enjoy it together. And, my brother was really into it. And a couple of my brother's friends went with us. And I was a little older and my mom was there. And we all sat in that movie theater and we all just kind of enjoyed the Pokemon movie. And it was just kind of a sweet moment, right? There was no tension. It was just kind of a sweet moment. And I look back on that and I think, that was nice. Even though I was annoyed with the Pokemon thing for the first couple of years, my brother was into it. By the time the Pokemon movie came out, right? I remember sitting in the movie theater and afterwards we talked about it and it was fun, whatever, whatever. Pokemon was just a thing that happened, right? It was a thing. I do remember there were some religious kids in my neighborhood that were very afraid of Pokemon. They thought they were devil worshipers or something. And I remember, the one kid was like, "Oh my God, Caleb, did you know that Pokemon stands for Pocket Monster?" And I'm like, "Yes." And that was supposed to be like the bum, bum, bum. And I was just like, "What's your point?" He's like, "Pokemon stands for Pocket Monster." And I'm like, "And so what? Like, and what? Like, what's the issue?" "Well, but it's a pocket monster." I'm just like, I'm waiting for the part where this is supposed to like upset me. But anyway, I digress. Right? That was a fun question you asked there, Gabby. I hope that you are satisfied with the answer. But yeah, look, you can't be at war with popular culture, right? When I was a kid, I didn't know the popular songs on the radio because my parents didn't want me to know them. And it's like, it was always like, well, the culture, the society you live in, it's bad. It's, we have to be different. And, that some of that stuff is good. And that's why I have been able to read all that I've read, and I've been able to learn about things and all that. But some of that stuff, it's not a good way to be, right? You can't be at war with the society you're in. You can't have the mindset. It's kind of like what I'm talking about here about the JQ. You can't have the mindset of being the other, right? It's not a healthy way to grow up. You're not going to have good relationships if you have the mindset of being the other, right? And if I could look back, if I could change one thing, I would try not to spend my life thinking about being in opposition to the society I live in. I talk about my journey of being a leftist and returning to God and all of that. And it is very much, right, that my parents kind of brought me up to see myself as the other, to kind of see the society around me as very dangerous. It's actually very Protestant. My mother's family on my mother's side, I'm actually descended from a very famous Protestant minister named Charles G. Finney. And, that is very much the Protestant mindset. The world around you is full of sin, right? The world around you is full of sin, right? And so you've got to just oppose the world, right? The world around you is full of sin, and you've got to condemn the world and all of that. That's a very Protestant way of seeing things, right? And, my parents more or less felt that way. Right? They didn't feel it from a religious sense. They were quite open-minded and much less conservative in a religious sense than a lot of the people I grew up in. But that was very much the mindset that my family at least had, right? The rest of the world around us is scary and dangerous and full of sin. And it is, right? The world around us is evil. I mean, it's not wrong, right? It's not wrong, I guess, but you can't define yourself by being in opposition to the society around you. And I feel like I went to being a communist because I was in opposition to the society around me, and I was exploring forbidden things, and I wanted to struggle for justice, and that communism very much has that mindset more than anything. Communists are more oppositional. They won't wave the American flag, and this is a racist, evil country and all that. And it took me going to Iran. It took me having my religious experiences. It took me realizing how and getting so frustrated with the communist groups because they couldn't grow and expand. It took me all of that to realize that if I am going to take this seriously, I can't be at war with the society around me, or at least not at war with the people. I have to love my people, right? I have to love America. I have to love the American people. I have to love the American working class. Last night we were talking about Jason and Ruhe, and that's Jason. I mean, Jason, I mean, he's at war with the society around them, right? And it's important to just, on the one hand, you have to be in the culture, but on the other hand, you have to be independent from it. And it's a balance. Where do you draw the balance, right? Because we do live in a society that is, we live in imperialism, right? American imperialism, the global imperialist system, and they control the media. And the media is run by, international capitalism. And so there is a lot of evil in this world. And so you do want to define yourself as being separate from it. But on the other hand, if you just kind of internalize this, I am different, everyone is different from me, that you can't live that way either. You have to find a balance, right? You have to find a balance. This is a big part of what it means to be an American, right? All these Protestant groups that were packing up and moving to America. Why were they moving here? Because, they wanted to get away from everybody. This society in Europe is full of sin and evil, and we want to be separate. So there's a big part of that in the American identity. And if you go to small towns and all of that, there's a lot of people who really have this mindset of like, the world around me is evil and I need to be shielded from it. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong, but it's a dangerous place to be, right? It's a dangerous place to be. You have to find a balance. That's what I'm saying. And I think that's what I've spent my adult life doing. I'm revealing way too much about myself on these streams, but it's whatever. But, you don't want to be at war with the society around you, but you don't want to completely conform to the society around you either. You want to maintain your ability to think independently. You don't want to be completely corrupted by the society around you, but you also don't want to abandon your principles either. It's an important way of being. And that's kind of my adult life. I've been struggling with these questions, my adult life, right? Is because I was very much, my parents are not communists by any means, but they still kind of brought me up with this mindset that the society around me is dripping in evil, and I wanted to be separate from it. And I internalized that. Now, my brother was the opposite, right? He wanted to fit in with the society around him. And I resented him for that. I thought, you're weak, right? You're not strong like me. You need to just be at war with the society. And my parents were at odds with the society they lived in. And I took it to a whole nother level. I became a radical communist, and I went to Iran, and but now I can kind of chill out. You know what I mean? I can kind of chill out, right? So it's complicated, right? It's complicated, and you live and learn, right? You live and learn. And that's, you live and learn. That's all I can say. Anyway, next question. Crazy how PSL is against third parties. They give themselves a bad rep. Nothing memorable, but them being angry for no reason, just trying to win an argument. Yeah, Gabby, I hope that the PSL people didn't give you too much trouble. You're in enemy territory. That's what I urge people to do. If you're doing the CPI thing, my advice is that if you're going to a left space, not among the masses, just be yourself. But if you're going into a communist or left space, don't announce CPI, because these people are psyched up to oppose you, right? These people are psyched up to, they have all these thought slime videos in their head, and we're evil, we're Nazis or whatever. So it's better to go into those spaces and look for people that are open, right? That's my advice I've been giving people. If you go to a Palestine rally or something, don't go in screaming, "We are CPI." No, just go there and look for the people who look like they might be open, and chat them up and get their information. And that's my advice. That's my advice. So there you go. So they said they weren't welcome. Didn't Jill Stein just have an event with the PSL woman, Claudia La Cruz? Didn't they just have an event with her or whatever? I don't know. Okay, whatever. I'm glad you're at the event. I'm glad you made some great contacts, Gabby. Gabby is working really hard. Gabby is doing amazing work. And Phil is, he hurt himself on the subway today. He's at home resting. I mean, the door is closed. So shout out to you, Phil. I hope you get the rest and you're feeling better soon. I'm sorry that happened on the subway. And, the other folks that are at the Dave Rovick's event, all you Chicago people are working really hard. You are working really, really hard, Chicago people. And my hat goes off to you. I have not gotten so much good news. I wish I was there with you in Chicago. I really do. My job had other plans for me, obviously. But I'm here in New York, and my hat goes off to you. And keep up the good work. That's what I can say. You guys are winter soldiers. The American Revolution, they talked about the summer soldiers who were there to fight the battle in the summertime. Then when it got cold in the wintertime, they were out of there. Well, it was the hardcore followers, the most dedicated fighters for Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. They were the winter soldiers. You guys are winter soldiers there in Chicago. John and Ellie and Gabby and Phil, you guys are winter soldiers. And I take my hat off to you. And Killian as well. Killian's doing great work. He's, Gavin was there recently. My hat goes off to Gavin. You guys are winter soldiers, right? Look, this is a tough time for PSL. Or I'm sorry, not for PSL. I wish it was a tough time for PSL, but this is a tough time for CPI. There's some big changes that have happened in the last few months. And everything's changing in American politics. Everything is changing really fast right now because our country's in crisis, and we're adjusting and changing. And we have been hit with some curveballs lately. We're handling it all actually very well. And I think these are necessary adjustments and corrections, right? There were weak links in our chain, and, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And, so there's that. And there's also some confusion. We cannot, and I said this long before any of the other drama happened. I said, we can't be a party of internet fans. Said we can't do it, right? We can't be an internet niche. And then, some of the overlapping internet niches, engaged in a maneuver that was clearly aimed at trying to harm us. And actually it was helpful because it got people out of the way that shouldn't have been there. We can't be an internet niche if we're going to survive, right? We cannot be an internet niche. And so right now we are not an internet niche, and we are transitioning, and Gabby is at the forefront of doing the work like nobody else, and Phil and John. And I mean, we are becoming the organization that we need to be, which is not an internet niche. And we lost some internet niche people. That's unfortunate. We also lost some people that had weaknesses, that cracked under pressure, that cracked under certain circumstances. And that was going to happen eventually. And so we're transitioning. And we're transitioning to operating in the way that we need to operate to get the job done. I will say what I have said over and over and over again. CPI exists to get the job done. That's it. I don't care if you're in the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the Bull Moose Party, right? The Anti-Masonic Party, the Revolutionary Anarchist Bowling League. I don't care. If you're in CPI, you can be in CPI. But if CPI exists to get the job done, and part of the job is developing you. I want to develop you to the best of your ability. I want to help you become a good speaker, you become a good writer, you make a contribution. I'm not in this to glorify myself, right? I was in a communist group that was about glorifying certain people and suppressing others to make sure that other people stayed in the spotlight. I will never do that to anybody. But I'm not going to stop what I do. And that's the other thing, right? I'm not going to not do what I do because, whatever, right? I endlessly push other people forward. I endlessly ask other people to speak and write and do stuff. But the idea that I should stop, right? Oh, we just need to stop. No, I mean, I'm not going to stop, right? I mean, I'm sorry, right? And some of the people that left, they said things to me that I look back on them and I think, how the fuck did they say that? Someone said to me, how many people is it going to be enough for you, Caleb? How many people do we need to recruit before you're going to be satisfied? Well, has the revolution happened yet? I mean, what is this, right? How big do we have to get, Caleb? It's like we're trying to get the job done, right? And it was weird. And like when I heard them say that, or we should just accept not being big, okay? Can't you just accept the group being small? No, not going to do that. No, can't you just accept? No. And when people started talking like that way, I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And what they were saying is that they were tired. And what they were saying was that, well, anyway, I could ramble all night about this, but it's just like, when people start talking that way, it's just like, I'm sorry, you're not building the group as a favor to me. You're building the group because you understand this needs to be done, right? That's why you're building the group. You're building the group because you understand this needs to be done. And so, I don't know. But anyway, and yeah, CPI is what I'm all about. I've invested my name, my livelihood, everything in it, right? So yes, I'm going to be obsessing over its growth and how we can expand and how we can make more opportunities. And yep, yes, sir. You betcha. I am all in for CPI. And so, yes, I'm going to be thinking about it constantly, and I'm going to not be satisfied with the results because that's my job, right? It's like a corporation. I'm the CEO of the corporation. My job is to make sure the corporation keeps growing. And I mean, and so there you go. What else? Thank you. I was not familiar with Alinsky's background. Sort of a DSA neoliberal. Yeah, basically. That's basically what he was. His name was Associated Dirty the Water. Yeah. I think Hillary Clinton wrote her thesis on him or something. But anyway, to be honest, Caleb, I was exposed to toxic things with pop culture, right? And that's not so good either, right? And so that's why I don't, my parents weren't wrong necessarily. I think my parents were right. We do live in an evil society. There is sin all around us, right? But at the same time, there's a balance, right? So I don't know. It's a complicated way of being. Anyway, folks, it's been fun like it always is. Thanks for being here. I'll probably be back tomorrow night. Don't know why I wouldn't be. So I'm going to put on the closing music and we're out of here. Yeah, thanks everybody. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.